I've been getting a lot of questions recently about how we operate our air-to-air heat pump system, so I thought it was probably about time to go into some of the details. I'm going to explain in this video how we use our system and why I've decided to operate it in that way. Now, of course, one of the advantages of air-to-air is that you can operate it in a number of different ways, however you choose, really. One common way people run their air-to-air is just on demand. So if a room is cold, they'll put on one of the units in heating mode to warm the room up, and that's completely valid. You know, put it on half an hour before you go into the room, for example, and it's nice and warm when you go in there, and turn it off when you leave the room. That's a valid way to do it, and in fact that's how we started out doing our heating when we first got it 2 years ago. So this is our third winter that we've been operating our air-to-air heat pump system. So if you've not already seen my tour video that I did back when we got it installed, I would recommend going and watching that first, and then coming back to this video. I'll put a link up in the corner up there if you want to go and watch that. And I'd also recommend actually watching another video by a channel called Upside Down Fork, a friend of mine. He did a really good comparison between air-to-air and air-to-water heat pump systems. That's well worth a watch. I did my own version a couple of years ago, but I think his is a little bit better, a little bit more up to date. He made a couple of comments in that video which I'd like to address, in particular how you operate air-to-air, and I would like to put a counterpoint to one of those the things he said in that video, whereby you can run it sort of on demand, and I would counter that with, actually you can also run air-to-air a bit like air-to-water in a sort of low and slow just a constant on system, in a bit like you would with an air-to-water system. And in fact that's what we're doing now, and I'd like to explain why we moved from doing it on demand to doing it more like an air-to-water low and slow method, because I think it's got various advantages. But before we do all that, I'd like to just show you the settings in the app that we've got. So we have a Toshiba multi-split system. In fact, we have two. We have one at the front of the house and one at the back of the house, and there's reasons for that, and it wasn't necessarily the best way we could have gone about doing it. That's probably a different video. In fact, I'm planning on doing a what we would have done differently video at some point, so I probably won't go into too many of the details there, but suffice it to say we have two external units, 5 indoor units, 3 at the front of the house and 2 at the back of the house. So when I show you the app, the Toshiba app, and how I've got that set up, you'll see what I've got actually is, in fact let me show it to you now. I'll bring that on screen, and you can see that what I've done here is I've got 2 groups of heat pumps. So you can see here we've got at the top there we've got the back cluster, so that's the one outdoor unit that I've got two indoor units connected to, and then the front heat pump outdoor unit connected to 3 indoor units, one of which is the office, and you'll see that one's actually turned off at the moment because it's this one here, and actually I get really warm when I'm recording these videos, so I usually turn that off just for my own comfort as much as anything. You can't hear it on the video. There's it's very quiet, so you wouldn't necessarily actually hear that on the video, but that's not the reason I turn it off. But you can see at the moment they're all on at, the back 2 units are on at 19 degrees and the front units are on at 18 degrees. That varies depending on the temperature outside and things like that. But let me, in the first instance, show you the schedule. So there's a little button at the top here. I'm going to click that, and this brings up the schedule. And you'll see that I've got these set up to come on at 2 different times in the day. So if I go to the let's just pick the lounge, for example. So they're all basically the same. So if I click on that, you'll see currently, so it is we're partway through December now. Currently we've got the units coming on at midnight at night at 21 degrees and a fan speed of 2. So you can see if I click on this, it will bring up the settings, and you see that at the bottom there we've got the fan speed there is set to 2. And the temperature is set to 21. And you'll also see at the bottom there, I've got the swing button, this one here, and I've actually got it set so that all of the units point directly downwards, this button at the bottom there. So the vents point down, because what I want to do in when we're heating the house is to force the warm air down to the ground, like immediately straight out of the units, and then that sort of travels across the room and then gradually rises up in much the same way it would with a radiator. So that's why we do that. We don't have it swinging around left and right, because well, that causes drafts and other things. You don't really want that. If you prefer to do it that way, I'm not stopping you. I'm just saying how we're doing it. So if I go back, and you'll see then we turn it off at about 5:30. So that this period where we're heating to 21 degrees is coinciding with the Octopus Go off-peak period between midnight and 5:30. So that's when we're paying only 8.5 pence per kilowatt hour. If we were on Intelligent Go, it would be 7 pence, and we could actually run from 11:30 up to 5:30 for the same for a low cost, which is beneficial for a couple of reasons. Now, previously, when we were doing it on demand, obviously we weren't using it overnight. And in fact, last winter, up until about mid-January, we were doing much the same thing. We were just running during the day. We weren't heating overnight. But then I did a little bit of analysis. And if you've seen that video, you'll know how complicated it was. Well, what I did, I actually did some physical modelling of the house in terms of the physical characteristics, how much heat capacity it has in the walls and the furniture and all that other stuff. And I actually calculated that if we were to put heat into the house overnight, because of the thermal mass of the house, like the furniture and the walls and all that other stuff, that keeps the house warm for quite a long time, in fact. And that means that we were able to put heat into the house during the overnight period when the electricity is cheap, which means the heat is very, very cheap. So we're adding heat to the house when it's cheap, and that also then means that when we're running during the day, because the house is already warmed up, the heat pumps don't need to run as strongly, which means they run more efficiently. Hopefully, that's the idea anyway, and at a lower level, which means that our home storage battery, lasts further into the day. So in fact, during October and November, we basically didn't use any peak power at all, because all the heating was supported by the battery all the way through the day. Apart from a couple of brief periods in November when there was a bit of a cold snap, and I've got another video. You can see my previous stats video about that. Go check that one out if you're interested, and I'll be adding to that throughout the winter. So check back periodically for the monthly stats videos where I show how much peak power we're using. In December, we're using a little bit more peak power. It's getting a little bit colder, so typically it's we're running out of power between sort of 7 o'clock in the evening, and then we're having to use a little bit of peak power. Sorry, we're running out of battery between 5 to 7 o'clock in the evening, and then we're having to use peak power from then on. But it's only a few kilowatt hours, so it's way, way, way less than we had to use last winter when we weren't heating overnight. So that's the main reason that we're now doing it this way, is that the modelling that I did convinced me that it would be worthwhile to do this boosting overnight. Now, if you've got a really, really big battery or loads of solar panels or whatever, then maybe you don't need to do that. That's entirely your call. I'm not saying that what we're doing would be universally applicable to everybody, but I would suggest that if you have home storage batteries, or you don't have home storage batteries, you just have a heat pump, that might be well worth doing, because it means you'll use less peak power to run your heating, which makes the heating cheaper. So inevitably, by doing that, we are using more energy overall. We're using more kilowatt hours to heat the house, but it's significantly cheaper. And again, go and watch the stats video for proof of that. We used more energy in November this year than we did last year, but it cost us quite a bit less. So yeah, that's worth considering if you've got a setup similar to ours, or you don't have a home storage battery. Definitely consider boosting overnight, and definitely go and watch that spreadsheet video that I did when I did that analysis. It's long and complicated and probably quite tedious for most people, but I found it fascinating to do, so I would recommend going and checking that out. Anyway, I got completely distracted from doing my the settings. So as you can see, we're boosting overnight, and then the heating comes back on again at about 6:45, and it picks up at 19 degrees. and we have it actually on the lowest fan setting down here. So, oops, I've changed that. I will put that back to 1, and again with the vents pointing directly downwards. So we find that the lowest fan setting is sufficient to just trickle the heat into the house. It doesn't need to be blasting, hot air everywhere. It's sufficient to just get a constant dribble of heat into the house in much the same way that a heat pump, an air-to-water heat pump would do if you have a sort of low flow temperature in your radiators, for example. So it's just adding a little bit of heat constantly to the house. And we more or less leave that for the whole day. So if I then go back to the view here, you can see that that runs all the way through until about, well, what did I say? It was about 9 p.m. Let's have a look. 9:30, there you go. But that's basically the backstop position. Generally speaking, we never run the heating all the way through till 9:30, because generally speaking, the house is at temperature in the evening, and because we're basically in the lounge, which is one of the smaller rooms in the house, we find that actually overshoots a little bit from the 19-degree set point, and it often gets up to 22 degrees, at which point we just turn the units off anyway, because we don't really need them to be on anymore, and often we've turned them off before 8 o'clock. So just in case we don't get round to it, the schedule will turn them off automatically at 9:30. Just to make sure that they're not running overnight. You'll notice that the bedroom is the one exception to all of this. If I click on that, this is one that we don't heat overnight. We only heat during the day, because obviously we don't want the unit coming on overnight and warming the bedroom up. That's one advantage of air-to-air, again, that you can just choose which units to turn on and off, and we find that quite convenient. We have it come on basically scheduled for when we get up in the morning. So in fact, this is Wednesday, so we get up at 7:15. We get up at different times on different days for various reasons, because we work some days and we don't work other days, and obviously the weekends we get up a little bit later. So you can change that in the app and schedule it for different settings for different days, and that's quite convenient. So that's how we set up the schedule, and you'll notice that it's on for a good chunk of the day. But what I want to do now is show you actually what the power looks like in when it's actually in use. And for that, I've got the outdoor units are plugged into smart plugs outside in a weatherproof outside power supply box, and that monitors the energy use, and I can then use the GivEnergy app, because they're GivEnergy smart plugs, and that gives us the energy use, which is really useful. So let me switch to that one now. Right, so here we are. This is today, and you can see that we have been running the heat pump overnight during this period here. This is the boost period until it turns off at 5:30, and then it turns back on again at about 6:45, and then it runs all the way through. And you can see I'm currently recording this at about 10 to 12, just before lunchtime. And you can see that overnight the fact that we're boosting means that we're using a lot more energy, a lot more power, and in the front units, the one that runs the three indoor units at the front of the house, is running at about 1200 watts. It goes up to 2 kilowatts there, back down to 1300, then down to about 1200 again, and then it turns off. The back unit, the outside back unit, which runs the two units at the back of the house, that's our bedroom and the hub. Obviously, it's only running the hub, so that what we call the hub is sort of like the kitchen diner area, and that's one of the larger indoor units. And that's because it's only running just the one unit overnight rather than 3 units. You can see that the power draw is a lot less. So that's more like 700 watts, something like that. It goes up and down a little bit. And then again, that turns off. And then when they all come on in the morning, because the house is already warm and the set point is now at 19 degrees instead of 21 degrees, you can see that the power is significantly less. In fact, let me zoom in a little bit. I'm going to change the time scale on here to 12 hours. And you can see that it's closer to 500 watts each. So we're running at about a kilowatt roughly between the two units. Now, I'd said I'm going to do a whole video about what we would do differently if we were doing this again. But one thing I would suggest is don't overspec your system. So we've massively overspec'd our system. We really didn't need 2 outdoor units. We could have got away with a single 5-way multi-split instead of 2 3-way multi-splits. So one of the reasons for that is I think that it would be probably more efficient to do it that way. It would also be a lot cheaper, in fact, because we'd have 1 fewer outdoor units. But you see here, because we're running half a kilowatt each unit doesn't really go lower than about 300, 400 watts. So when it's mild in October or November, for example, what we often find is that the back unit in particular drops down to sort of 300 watts, and then it will start cycling up and down. So it would turn on and off quite quickly. And in fact, you can see that if I zoom in really close here, you can see here's a good example. The outdoor unit suddenly started going up and down very quickly. Now this was a very mild example, and obviously it was overnight, so it then settled down and carried on. But let me pick a different date, and I want to show you an example where it was doing it a little bit more frequently. Here we go. So if I zoom in a little bit more here, this is one thing that I think if we had a 5-way multi-split instead of 2 3-ways, we would get much less of this rapid cycling. Let me zoom in a little bit more actually. This here. So this is where the outdoor unit that runs the back indoor units is down at 360 watts, and that's the lowest rating that the compressor can run at. It can't go lower than that, which means if the room is already warm, then it can't provide less energy, so it just starts turning off on and off, and it does it really quickly. You can see every 10 minutes or so it's turning on and off and on and off again. Now obviously this is not great for wear and tear, and it certainly kills the efficiency of the heat pump, which means I don't want it to be doing that in particular very often. So when I see it doing this, and I check it periodically on this app throughout the day just because I'm obsessed, and that's the sort of thing I like to spend my time doing. If I spot it doing this, I just turn off the outdoor unit, and you can see I've done that here, and I've switched it off, and I'll leave it off for a couple of hours, and then when I turn it back on again, the rooms have cooled down a little bit, and it will carry on as normal. And in fact, you'll see this is a rare example when the front units actually started cycling as well, and I did the same thing. I turned off the front unit there, and then turned it back on again a few hours later. So let me zoom back out again, and you can see a bit wider. And again here you can see this is where I basically turned them off because the house was warm enough, and we didn't really need them on. So the two situations where I manually turn off the units when it does this cycling, or if the temperature in the rooms has overshot the set point. So this is something that quite often happens with our system. We set it to 19, but often the rooms will overshoot and go to 20 or 21, and that's fine actually. This is more or less what we want, except for if it goes like really high, really warm, like up to 22, then at that point it gets a bit too warm, so I'll turn them off. So in fact, what I do before that is I'll usually set the set point down to 18. But then it is more prone to cycling. So if it's already set to 18 and it's overshooting to like 20, 21, 22, then I'll turn off the units manually. And that's something you can do with air-to-air. It's not too tricky, but that just maintains the comfort in the house, so it doesn't get too hot, and also it means that we're using a little bit less energy because we're not overly heating the house. So I think that's more or less everything I wanted to show you today. Hopefully you found that useful. I'm sure that a lot of you will be like, well, why are you doing it that way? You should be doing it a different way. We have had the system now this is our 3rd winter, as I mentioned before. And this particular strategy that we're doing now, we are way more comfortable this winter than we were last winter. Kat in particular is super pleased about that. She was always complaining last year that we were, some of the larger rooms like the hub were a little bit too cold, and that's definitely not the case this year. It's probably about a degree or so warmer in there than it was last year, because we don't tend to use that room that often. I was keeping that a little bit cooler, but concentrating on heating the lounge where we spend more of our time, because it's a little bit smaller, so it heats up a bit more quickly. We obviously do heat the bedroom during the day. Now, I know some of you will be like, well, you shouldn't be heating your bedroom. We do that because we then obviously turn it off in the evening, and then it stays at maybe 19 degrees, drops down to 18 or maybe 17 overnight, and then comes back on in the morning, and that's perfectly comfortable for us. You may feel differently, and that's totally fine also. But yeah, we've definitely never felt more comfortable. We are definitely using more energy, but as I explained before, it is costing us less. So I think, given the pros, mainly it's more comfortable and it's costing us less. Despite the fact that we're using a little bit more energy, the energy we are using is going to be the greener energy, because it's typically overnight energy or battery energy, which we've obviously charged up overnight. So typically our carbon footprint is almost certainly lower. In fact, I did another analysis after the cost analysis last year. I did one about the carbon impact, and that also proved, well, I say proved, suggested that our carbon impact was also lower by doing this strategy. So many benefits to doing it the way we're doing it now. So if it's something that you're wondering whether or not to change your behavior and trying it out, give it a go. You may find that you don't like it, that's fine, but you may find that it's beneficial to you, in which case, brilliant. Definitely worth experimenting. So that's basically what we're doing here. We're experimenting, trying different strategies, and we have found that this strategy works particularly well for us at the moment, and I'm super pleased with the way it's going. And at the end of the winter, I'll have all of the data to show you exactly, how much energy we used, and I'm going to do a bit of modelling and have some proper nerd spreadsheet stuff going on there. So look forward to those ones if that's the sort of thing you enjoy. But yeah, otherwise, hopefully you found that useful. If you've got a similar system to ours, you may find that it operates in a different way, because obviously we've got these two outdoor units. If we had a single outdoor unit, maybe it would behave in a different way. It would probably cycle less, but maybe we would need to bump up the temperature a bit more. I don't know really, because obviously I don't have that system, so I can only show you what we've got and how it's behaved. I can't tell you hypothetically what a slightly different system would do. But nonetheless, hopefully this has given you some sort of idea of how you could run your system, and if it's something that you want to experiment with yourself, I recommend trying a few different strategies, seeing what you're comfortable with, and seeing what the cost impact is, because it's bound to be different between different houses and all that other stuff. So anyway, that's probably everything I should say. Beyond that, there's no point me carrying on any further. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.